In the 90s, Playmates Toys made the deepest line of Star Trek action figures in history. My name's Keith, and I'm a collector working towards owning all 284. I've been a Trek fan for almost 35 years, and most people are sick of me talking about it. But somehow I've convinced my old friend Mike to review them with me on Look at My Star Trek Toys! What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Look at My Star Trek Toys, a little show in which I, Keith, show Mike my Star Trek toys. And this is going to be a fun episode. I texted you last week and I said I just bought our next episode because I bought a complete set of Series 2 of the Transporter series. And this came out in 1998. Playmates Toys decided, we've made variations and all sorts of things, but we haven't had the figures actually transporting. So here we are. This is the next generation cast, or at least as many as they made. And we've got some really fun things that we're going to do today. How's it going, Mike?
It's going great. I'm excited. I'm excited that we're going to get to see some figures in action. So,
That's true.
Some translucence. I'm excited for it. I'm psyched.
That's true. This will be the second. The first one we look at will be the second transparent figure that we have looked at. Do you remember the last one that we looked at?
I remember it. We were looking on Toy Cam. It was a bit older. I don't remember.
It was a Geordi transformed into an alien, and that was the Toy Fair exclusive figure. So that was fun. Well, these ones are really kind of interesting in a couple of different ways. So why don't we just jump straight in and take a look at our first Transporter series figure. And that is figure 6421 Data. Let's have him. He's beaming in his beaming in figure. There's so much beaming happening here.
There's a lot of beaming.
So let's just talk about this for just a second. What's going on here with Data? The first thing that everybody is going to react to is, he seems to be wearing the Deep Space Nine uniforms. And we just did an episode about the next-gen folks in the Deep Space Nine uniforms. But guess what? Those aren't the Deep Space Nine uniforms. And you can tell that from a couple of things. But if you look at the collar, there's no sort of zip down with the purple under it. This is actually cut just like the original next-gen uniforms. So it becomes a very interesting thing here because unless there's something I'm not aware of, this was a mistake. Because nobody ever wore these uniforms. The closest thing would be, I think, the cadet uniforms that Wesley wore, but certainly none of these characters ever wore anything like this. So what was this a mistake? Question. Was it a compromise because if he's going to be yellow transparent as he's beaming, that going into the gold, which his chest would normally be, does that just not look good? And did they think like, whatever? And but certainly it is an interesting little piece of trivia here because it doesn't really make much sense.
I actually was interested too, Keith. And you probably can speak to this much better than I. You'll notice that, and the better podcast, as we say on our other show, we should have talked a little bit about the differences in transporters from set to set because I'm fascinated with the transporter, and longtime viewers will notice that we've now sound engineered our own transporter sound because my understanding is there's different transporter sounds and imaging for each series, and luckily we have our own now, just for. To avoid any IP, but
which, to be fair,
even though your family has a hand in they'd have to sue us.
We were using the next gen transporter sound, which my uncle was part of the team that developed, if not the lead of the team that developed that sound. So, to be fair, I was stealing from my family's IP, but as we talked about before, Paramount owns all of it, and there are no residuals coming anybody's way.
So it actually would have been a good podcast to actually show the different sounds from each different series, but that's not really, we're about the toys right here. My question, though, that does relate to the toys, is in the physics of the universe, okay?
Yes.
Of the actual transporter, It seems to me that do they beam in bottom up? Because the toy seems to indicate here that top down. The toy seems to indicate that they're being, their molecules are recompiling from the head to the toe, or does it happen all at once?
Well, yeah, and the question is it beaming up or down based on whether he is beaming in or beaming out, materializing or dematerializing. But you are very astute because in Trek lore, at least as we visually look at it, we typically beam all together. And there are different transporter beams. Sometimes they beam a little bit right to left. I think the Cardassians do that. But honestly, it's literally just like whatever visual effect looks cool. But there is no beaming that I'm aware of that goes up and down like that. So that is another sort of interesting compromise that Playmates did on these figures. Now, I'm not sure exactly how you would do it any other way. I think this is the coolest way you could do it, so I get that. And they needed to have at least some of the figure, from a practical standpoint, having the bottom half sort of transparent and not transparent. Is, I would imagine, incredibly difficult to do, but also kind of messes with the light stand that it lives on. And I figure now would be an opportune time to take a look at the whole shebang, because not only do I have this in box, I think it is time to go so far as to fully unbox one of these. So let's hop over. I'm going to waddle over to Toy Cam, and we're going to play with this. Okay, so hopefully you'll still be able to see me. But what I have right here in my grubby little hands is a completely boxed version of Data, which we were just looking at. I had another copy of him, which is what I shot before. So let's take this thing apart, huh?
Yeah, let's.
All right, so the way I usually open the Transporter series is I go in through the bottom, just because I feel like it creates less possible damage to the figure. Now, a smarter person here would have brought a knife or something to get through this tape on the bottom, but that's not, it's not what I did. That would show that'd show some forethought. That's really not my style. But you'll notice the Transporter series come in a completely different type of a box, as opposed to the typical carded with a little plastic pocket there for the figure and the choking hazards. These are much more complicated because they come with stands. Oh, there's one more piece of tape. That's what we're gonna do. Hopefully, this won't be as much of a disaster as the Trouble with Tribble scratch off. Remember that? That was a bit of a nightmare. Okay.
Actually, I thought that went relatively well, all things considered.
When I watched it back, it felt way longer than it actually ended up being. So it felt like it went on for about 45 minutes of me fighting with this thing. All right, so on the bottom here, we've got a little plastic dealie holding in the bottom of the transporter. So here is the bottom of the transporter, which is pretty cool with Playmates, and you can see it is labeled with which figure it is. So it says Lieutenant Commander Data. And inside of it are a couple of batteries which operate the lights and sounds. So I actually don't know if these batteries are from 1998, if you're counting at home. So these are pretty old. 23 years old? So let's see if they work.
Like the day they were set inside.
Like the day they were inside. So that's pretty cool. And in fact, of the 5 figures I bought when I bought the whole set, 4 of the 5 worked, which I thought was pretty good. All right. So now under here, we're going to pull out the figure itself. Now it's a little bit tricky because it's super tied in with a million different things. Now, if you go to the back, you'll see that they wrapped these things up as if they were like the nuclear bombs. So we're going to twist this off. This back plate here holding up the top half of the figure. And that will allow us to pull it out of the box here. So now we're down here. We're making progress.
That's cool.
Now,
That's cool.
Yeah, it's a whole thing, and you've got the back of the transporter. Now, which is vaguely modeled on the next gen transporter from the Enterprise D, but we're tied in a couple of other ways. So we're going to untwist this back here, because for whatever reason, they were very careful about protecting these things. All right, so now we have the back of the transporter here, and we'll just pull out that extra tie. So this, you connect in here with our good friend, the transporter. So once that's in, that's what it looks to beam without a person in there. And of course, we need to rescue Data. Now Data is even tied in further. He's got 2 more ties here with his feet that you have to reach into the plastic to get to, which is why it took me forever just to get the other ones out. And to be fair, I think I'm bleeding now, so that's exciting, huh? See, first time we've bled on air.
Yeah, it's true. First time for everything.
So Mike, you've picked up one of these. Now, do you enjoy the unwrapping process of your toys, or did you when you were a kid?
Yes. In fact, nowadays opening toys bugs me for the very reason, like when I'm helping my nieces and nephews open things, because they just tie them down so much. It's crazy. But for me right now, it's getting that cellophane off the box in the beginning, and that first open where that like air inside opens up. That's my favorite part.
And of course, the fun thing about these toys, speaking of the air inside, is folks, you shouldn't smoke ever. But definitely don't smoke around your collectible toys, because when I first opened these up, it was like I was in like some old man's leather chair, and it was it didn't smell great. So now you'll notice around his wrists, it looks like he's got an extra band there, but what that is, at some point in the process, they actually put rubber bands around the figures too. But over the years, they sort of degraded to the point where they almost disintegrated. And so you can sort of pull them off, the remnants of the rubber band. But, folks, there you have it. There is the fully unwrapped Data figure. Now, if we look at the box with all the packaging, there's a couple things to note. One, there are no numbers on the feet of the figures. Now, all the figures are individually numbered. That's part of what makes them collectible. But in this series, and with the twin packs and the box sets, it's actually numbered on the box itself. So if you're collecting this is number 3776. So if you're keeping track of this, you kind of have to keep the box. Now, of course, once you've opened it, you've lost most of your collectible money sort of a thing. But it is good to know that I have to keep these boxes around in order to know which number figure I have. So let's look at the back of the box here. We have a picture of what the toy does, which I think is a pretty good version, and the other toys in the line. And some more information about Data himself. So that's how you unbox one of the Transporter series. And let's head back and look more closely at the regular figure with my footage while I run back to my desk.
There it is. You know, I'm going to ask Keith when he gets back here, Keith. It looks to me like if we're thinking about saving a buck in manufacturing, my guess is that what they've done is just put on the translucent legs and then used the top half of the regular model and just painted the translucents onto it. Does that seem fair? Or is the bottom of the chest there? Let's take a peek.
No, and actually, and if you look at the arms are transparent as well. Yeah. It really is a crossfade of the transparent figures. I imagine what they did is they pulled the original model and created it out of that translucent material, then painted over it. So I would imagine that if I scraped off some of the paint on his face or on his shoulders, it would probably be all that same material. Although it's probably not his head. because the heads were done separately. So
It does look like that's a great fade of the paint job too, but it does look like it's the body is that translucence you can see up here.
no, it is, and they've got got sparkles in there. I mean, it's really cool. It's just really it's odd that the uniform's wrong, because otherwise it's a really cool figure.
Now,
So,
Keith, since you talked about it earlier, but let's go ahead and do it while I have it frozen here. Tell me again exactly what is the mistake here.
All right, hold on. Stay on this shot, and I'm going to go grab a Deep Space Nine figure.
Okay. We are staying on this shot. Keith is waddling about, and he's now jogging back. You just got.
That's right. See, I needed you to stay there, so we didn't see my waddle. That is the. That is literally what I cared about in that moment. So let's go back to Toy Cam.
All right, Toy Cam.
All right, so let's look at Data and Cisco together here. So you're going to see that Cisco has the cut down through his through his shirt. Also, it's a two-piece, and so the collar, there is no big collar of the same color. He's wearing sort of a turtleneck underneath it, and this is the standard next-gen cut of the figure. So that is it's clearly not designed to be a next-gen figure, and he has the next-gen communicator, which, to be fair, the Deep Space Nine folks used for the first 2 seasons. So very interesting. So the last thing I'm going to do for each of these, because everybody knows it's Brent Spiner, he's Data. Everybody knows what's going on with Data. So I've gone back to my memory, and I think I'm going to talk about the most interesting beam, the most memorable beam for each of these characters. Now, for me, for Data, the most memorable transporter beaming that he did was in the episode The Most Toys of Next Generation, where he beams out deciding whether or not to fire a phaser at Fivas Kajo, who had stolen him, to collect him, and left us sort of the episode of, did he try to kill him or not? To get revenge or to kill him because he's a bad guy. Is an android, is he allowed to kill somebody? So for me, that is Data's most memorable transporter incident. So let us move
Keith,
forward.
I have a favorite as well.
Oh, what's that?
Thank you so much for asking. Hold on, let me get back into my.
I'm so impressed you actually have a favorite. Like, I didn't know you had an opinion.
I
would always ask.
It reminds me of a time for this podcast where I had to actually, for a different podcast, interestingly enough, that we do, check it out. I had to look up the episode where Data is facing evil Data.
Data lore from season 1.
And in one of the most excellently, terribly choreographed fight sequences, good Data, has to sort of like flippity-doo-dah bad Data into the transporter to transport him away from the ship. So it was transporter on evil Data in order to save the day.
Transporting lore into space. Yeah, that is a good one. Although technically, I would say that is lore's most memorable beam.
I guess fair.
But that's excellent. Okay, good. Well, I'm excited to find out.
The kitten is chewing the wires, so we might lose the podcast and my whole setup. So
great. Well, I'll look forward to that.
Come here.
Well, all right. So while the kitten chews on the wires, and you can start thinking about what you remember their most memorable beam out is, we're gonna go to figure 65422, Jean-Luc Picard. Here he comes, folks.
Ooh, color variation.
Color variation. So Picard is sort of a pink-purple hue on his transport, and of course it's going to match sort of the color of the uniform that he is wearing. But again, same issue with the uniforms. Aren't really the right uniforms at all. But it's still a Jean-Luc Picard figure, and I think it looks pretty cool. What do you think, Mike?
It is cool. The hands are a little weird. maybe it's just the way you got him posed in this. But yeah, it's cool. It's interesting that they choose the different colors. That has to just be for just pure variation, right?
Yeah, for the beaming itself. Yeah, it's certainly, if you look at the whole thing, all the ones with gold on their shoulders have gold beam outs, and if it's red, they have this sort of
okay. I was gonna wonder because it was pretty good packaging. I remember the back plate for the yellow for Data was yellow, which kind of matched his beam translucence.
Right. Well, and the back plates are all yellow of the transporter series. Actually, you know what? Go back to Toy Cam. I'll show you them all together. So here, oops, Data's making a run for it. But they're all they all match. They're all individually labeled, so you can see that that's, he's sitting on Picard's, whatever. But you can see that they are labeled an individual. But the transporter room backdrop is all the same. And you can see Picard is doing his make it so hand, which is why his two fingers are out there. Yeah. So I'm going to tell, before I say what I think Jean-Luc Picard's most memorable beam was, do you have one?
You know, Keith, it's hard to pick one. I'd say all the beams are pretty spectacular.
Mike beamed out of that question. So I think, certainly Picard had some, death-defying transporter journeys. But for me, his most memorable beam is in the episode Rascals, where, Mike, you'll never guess what happened. But guess what? He got beamed into a child version of himself. And ran around the Enterprise as a 12-year-old or so. On fighting off the Ferengi. So
was he in the chateau?
He was not in the chateau. He was on the Enterprise O. Enterprise O would be pretty advanced. Enterprise D. But anyway, so many of these things, and I talked in the intro on this show. There's a clip of me talking on Retrotech, which about transporters specifically and about transporter accidents. And as part of that, I came up with a list of all the various things that went wrong with the transporter. And we're gonna have a whole bunch of them in this because golly, did lots of things go wrong and very interesting ways. So who knows? Maybe the transporter will turn you into the child version of yourself, which is, honestly, that'd be great. If I could transport myself back to like 25 every 15 years, I'd be really psyched. And then I can get fat again. Oh man, what a dream. All right.
I'll tell you what, the journey to getting fat is actually a very fun one. It's once you're there, it kind of sucks.
Oh no, absolutely. Yeah, no, that's the journey is more fun than the destination. That's kind of true of life, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Well,
with all of our mortality.
I feel like we should journey to the Riker figure.
Well, that's not what's next. What's next is 6, 5, 4, 2, 3, Worf.
Oh yeah, okay. I'm gonna just reorder it real quick, and now we're good.
No, we can do Riker. Doesn't matter. Okay, so here we are with Michael Dorn as Worf, using one of the later Worf heads, because he has the ponytail and not the Pantene Pro V bob that he had in his early figures, and yet his hands and his stance look like it's from the first season model. So they definitely did some kit bashing here to create this mixture on this figure. Mike, what do you think?
It's cool. It's cool. Look, it does seem like they've come up a little further on the arms here than some of the other ones. But I guess that's necessary when it's as gigantic as this one is.
Yes. Well, the toy version of Klingon can be a little bit more exaggerated than they had the budget to do with Michael. I mean, Michael Dorn's a big dude. Don't get me wrong.
It would be cool if they did, since we're taking a little bit of a liberty with like the physics anyway. It would have been cool if they had sort of done a half and half. You know what I mean? Like a what do you call it? When you bifurcate something down the middle, I can't remember. A cross-section look, you know what I mean? Like, so we could see the translucent head and stuff. That would be kind of cool.
That would be kind of cool. I don't know if that would be as satisfying on the shelf.
Yeah.
I'm sure that somewhere in the bowels of Mount Playmates, they had these discussions and probably played with a couple of different ideas. But I think they did what they could.
Yeah.
I think it made sense.
Actually, if anybody out there has any prototypes or anything like that, because I know that those slip out to collectors, it'd be cool to see. So go ahead and tag us on the Instagram if you've got any with at Star Trek Toys. We'd like to see them.
Yeah, for sure. All right. So do you have a memorable Worf B mount?
Like I said before, I think all of Worf's B mounts specifically are very matter of fact.
I'm asking you because you were so indignant that I didn't ask you on the first one, and then you have no answers for the whole rest of the time.
Oh, well, I'll figure something out.
Well, I think Worf's most memorable beam was in Best of Both Worlds Part 2, where he and Data abducted Locutus or rescued Picard, depending on who you think he was at that point. Certainly, and it was a very, it's one of the most famous and best episodes of all time, but they snuck in through the shields of the Borg cube and beamed him into, with a shuttlecraft and beamed him out, and they rescued Locutus, and that's what made the whole Best of Both Worlds Part 2 happen. Of course, Worf being an action hero, there's lots of things happened, but for me, I thought that was the most impactful because it gave us Picard back. It felt like a, important thing in the run of the series. So, speaking of important things in the run of the series, I think it is time to see what Commander Riker is up to in Figure 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, Commander Riker! And, yes, so here we are, the Jonathan Frakes as Riker. Now, this figure really does bring up my question about one of our most requested figures for them to make in the future. And that is the non-effed up Riker, where he is in his regular uniform where it's not all torn from the weird Series 1 decision that they made. So right here, you have the model for it. It's done. It's already there. All you have to do is paint it normally and release it, and you're done, and you have that figure.
It would be pretty easy to make a custom, right? Because you would really just need to do the painting yourself.
Well, you wouldn't even need to do that. If you just take a red uniform and just make sure the rank matches Commander, you could just swap. You'd have a little issue with scale because I think the only red standard ones. You could use Q's body. Because he's taller. Because
how easy is it to assemble and disassemble? Like how are these snapped together? Like if I'm not, I know it's not the same, but I think back to for some reason all I can think of right now is G.I. Joe and how they've got like a much more difficult dislocation process.
Well, the G.I. Joe ones were easy because they had a screw in the back. I did this constantly. There's just one screw in their back. Pull it off, their chest plate popped open, and that freed both arms and the head. And if you went further than there's a rubber band holding the legs on. And so I spent a lot of time taking my G.I. Joes apart and creating like the super G.I. Joe with the most like grenades. Because 12-year-old boy, what are you going to do? But these are a little bit more difficult because I think in order to get the heads off, you basically just have to break it off and then glue another head down. But I've never done a custom. So custom makers, let us know how you're doing it. I'd be very curious. We're going to try to do some episodes on customs.
Yeah, I'm very fascinated. I've gone down a couple rabbit holes of the customs, and I find it to be really pretty cool. So I've requested that Keith allow us maybe to step outside of the base premise of just looking at his toys and maybe checking out some of your toys so we can see some custies.
No, for sure. All right, so Riker's most memorable beaming incident, I wonder if you might remember can you think of a memorable thing that happened to William Riker in a transporter that we have talked about previously at length on this show?
Could it be, Keith, when he is this evil Riker? Not evil. I'm on the right track though.
Yes, you are, from Second Chances, the transporter accident that created
Yes.
his. Is he evil? Not evil? Who knows? He's just a little bit of a loose cannon, Thomas
Alter
Riker.
ego. Yes.
Alter ego. Yeah. So, yes, being duplicated definitely counts as a memorable transporter accident. So, yeah, well done. Look at that. You're paying attention.
Well, I really just remembered because I think the underrated movie Multiplicity with Michael Keaton really matches that plot line.
Yeah, fair enough. Well,
You
they do
didn't think I was
action
going to throw a
figures on
multiplicity reference in today, did you?
I did not. You got to stay on your feet here. Stay on your toes. All right. So the last figure in this series is none other than 65433 Geordi LaForge. Let's see him. Of course, Levar Burton in his iconic role. And of course, wearing a uniform, never worn on the series. But certainly a cool figure. Any thoughts?
I love LeVar Burton. I love Geordi LaForge, and the only thing I could love more than LeVar Burton and Geordi LaForge, Keith, is Geordi LaForge being beamed in somewhere, and that's what we get here. So I'm very happy. I wish they would beam him into Jeopardy, but that's a different conversation.
I know, right? I don't know what's going on there. Yeah, I mean, it's a cool figure. Obviously, they're using his head from probably the first series, which got used a fair amount, and they have made in which they'd made the mistake of not gluing down his visor and making it a feature that it came off and choked your children. But luckily, this is good and glued down. And I can talk about what I think my most memorable Geordi transporter incident is. Do you have one of your own, Michael?
I don't. I remember him transporting into my childhood and reading me all kinds of great books, but I think
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true. All right, take a look. And so I think one of his most interesting journeys was in the next phase, in which, due to interference from a Romulan ship's cloaking device, he actually kind of got beamed into being a ghost.
What?
With Ensign Rowe, he basically got cloaked through, I think it was chronoton particles, which create all things in all of Star Trek. But he was able to, nobody could see him, and he could walk through walls and not really affect things with his touch.
Oh,
so
that's cool.
He and Rowe are wandering around the ship. Everybody thinks he's dead. Everybody thinks they're dead. And so he's watching people mourn him and figure out how to do the funeral while they slowly realize that, oh, we're not dead. Because they're like, are we dead? Is this what this is? Is this the afterlife? What do we do? And became it was a great episode, really good episode. But certainly a memorable consequence of the safer than anything transporter. And so while we're at it, if we stay on this two-shot here with the Next Generation's background of the transporter, and we show the footage of him in his transporter little stand box, we can see that while the yellow was way brighter than it was in real life, it really matches the background piece of the transporter room on Next
That's
Gen.
cool. That's very cool.
Now, other piece of trivia, if you look at the lights that he's standing on, I believe the lights from the original series were put on the ceiling of Next Gen. So they incorporated, or vice versa, I'm not sure which one, but they incorporated, there's those sounds. Jim does not get a quarter. But they incorporated a piece of the original set into the Next Gen set in the transporter room.
Cool. Very cool.
So, yeah, so there he is in his full regalia. Now, when you're buying the Transporter series, there are no choking hazards. They don't come with a stand. They don't come with phasers and bits and bobs because, let's face it, you're getting yourself a whole stand with lights and sound. So, And I think they were sold at a premium, too. I think they were a little bit more expensive than the regular ones. But that's it. That is Series 2 of the Transporter series of Playmates Toys back in 1998. Now that you have seen them all, you're going into the toy store and you're looking at the Star Trek action figures. Would these particular ones be more or less interesting to you if little Mike is buying a Star Trek toy?
Interestingly, Keith, little Mike, I don't know. Definitely more colorful, but the problem with these is that these much more appeal to those who want to keep it in that little stand and make the sound and whatnot. And since those aren't actually on the body, it doesn't appeal to me as much because I was not one at the time when I was younger for the bits and bobs. I just wanted the figure so that I could just like go and make the scene. Nowadays, I'm much more drawn to this because I like an interactive thing. I like something I can spin. I like something that lights up. I like something that is a bit unique or talks. I used to love when they would talk to you too. So, in fact, we haven't encountered any that did they ever license the voices so that they could give me a "make it so" or whatnot?
They did actually. They did do a talking series. They didn't do a lot of them, but they did a handful of one. Now their scale is different. I think they're listed on Wixaben. They're 7-inch scale. They're not even the 6-inch scale of some of the later figures. So I don't have them yet, but obviously we're going to have to get them and review them. So
this is great because you spend money and I don't have to.
Yeah, I don't know how this is supposed to. Yeah, this is terrible. This is a very expensive show to do.
Well, Playmates, you can help us out there. Do you want to get the word out again? Do you want us to help people? We're starting an email campaign, if you didn't know, to encourage Playmates to let Keith and I review their new toys and maybe throw us some from the Wayback Machine that they want bubbled to the surface. I don't know why they would do that, but maybe they will.
It doesn't make any sense. But actually, you know what? You can help us, folks, because we've reached out to Playmates. A couple of folks have already reached out to Playmates. But I think the more that they hear from folks saying, "Hey, these guys, you should give them some information, and we can get our information from them," you can email toys@playmatetoys.com and say, "There's a couple of nerds on the internet, a couple of dummies, but they really like the toys, and we like their show." So send them an email, toys@playmates.com. And, if they would like to reach us, how would they do that, Mike?
It's very easy to do so. What's the name of the show? Look at My Star Trek Toys? Well, how about look at My Star Trek Toys @gmail.com. Send us an email. Let's chat. If you want to chat, you can also do so on the YouTube comments down below. Keith gets back to just about everybody. I try to as well. I love watching when people tell Keith he's wrong because it makes my day. But be cool, everybody. Be cool. He's doing his best, and we're doing it just as a hobby. We ain't making any money just yet. But that can change if you hit the like button below and hit that subscribe and hit the notification bell, because apparently that does something in the back end. But it also lets you know when our next episode is released. I think that's everything, Keith.
Yeah, and I tell you what, if I don't get back to you, it's because maybe you put a link in it, and YouTube sort of makes it go away. There's a couple of people I can see they commented, and I want to reply, but it doesn't show up on the feed because YouTube, for whatever reason, doesn't want to post it. So that's why you might not have heard back from me. But otherwise, you're going to hear because I am so psyched to talk to you. Well, folks, thank you for watching this episode. We will be back next week with another exciting affair of... Look at my Star Trek toys!